Imagine writing a song that, like, completely defines an entire generation.
Oh, the dream, right?
Right. It has the perfect melody, it captures the exact feeling of the era, and millions of people connect with it. But what happens if the actual physical building where you first played that song,
Right.
the venue where you actually met your producer, is suddenly just bulldozed to make way for, I don't know, a luxury condo?
That's happening all the time.
It really is. And
Yeah.
we so often think about music as this, like, magical thing that just exists in the air.
Hmm.
But today, we're going to look at why the survival of music and its ability to actually travel from one generation to the next relies almost entirely on real estate, legal loopholes, and the physical and, honestly, the virtual rooms that we build.
Yeah, it's a critical perspective shift, I think. We really tend to romanticize the lone genius, strumming a guitar in a vacuum.
The struggling artists in the bedroom.
Exactly. But art requires this incredibly fragile ecosystem to survive. And without a specific place to incubate, to perform, or to even just be legally protected, that creative magic kind of it simply evaporates before anyone gets to hear it.
And that fragility is exactly what we are focusing on for you today. Our mission is to uncover how these spaces are built, how they get threatened, and how artists are actively fighting to preserve them.
It's a huge topic.
It is. And to guide this deep dive, we are pulling from a really detailed piece of source material. It's an article fully titled, let me get this right, The Thursday Rotation, The Rooms Between Generations, Canadian Music News, and New Releases.
That's a mouthful, but a good one.
Yeah, it is. And we'll be looking at the events from July 22 to July 29, 2026, just covering that window, relying on the reporting by authors Tarjin Rahman, Spock, and Claude. And I should also note that this deep dive is produced by Gemini. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
I want to start by looking at a room that practically birthed a Canadian legend. I'm talking about the late Montreal jazz pianist, Oliver Jones.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, it is very hard to overstate Jones's impact on the entire jazz ecosystem.
Totally.
He just passed away on July 22nd at the age of 91, which is, a life well lived. He left behind a career that spanned more than 8 decades.
8 decades. That's just wild.
Right. But if you look at the historical record, what made him an icon wasn't just raw technical brilliance. I mean,
Though he absolutely had that.
he had it in spades, yeah.
Yeah.
But it was the mechanics of how he played. He possessed this rare ability to make a piano sound impossibly elegant without it ever feeling distant or clinical or just unapproachable.
Yeah, the sources actually describe it perfectly. Even when he was doing something mathematically complex on the keys, it never felt like he was just showing off for the sake of it. He played as though he were welcoming you, the listener, into the music with him. But in reading his background, I actually found something genuinely counterintuitive.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You hear Montreal jazz legend, and you just naturally assume he spent his entire 20s and 30s grinding away in local Montreal clubs.
Right, playing smoky bars.
Exactly. But his path was completely nonlinear.
It completely disrupts the standard prodigy narrative. Yeah. Instead of climbing the local ranks, Jones actually spent 16 years entirely away from the Montreal jazz scene.
Which is so crazy to me.
He, working down in Puerto Rico, he was the musical director for Kenny Hamilton's Jamaican Calypso Orchestra.
16 years playing calypso in Puerto Rico. And he didn't truly launch his main Montreal jazz career until his mid-40s.
Yeah.
It's like a brilliant second act in a play that completely redefines the main character.
Absolutely.
But this is where the concept of the room becomes so crucial. I have to ask, what was the exact mechanism that allowed a guy in his mid-40s to come back and launch such a defining second act?
So the mechanism was a very specific physical space called Biddle's Jazz and Ribs.
Okay.
Jones returned to Montreal in 1980, and he started playing with this well-known bassist named Charlie Biddle.
Hence the name.
Exactly. So when Biddle's opened its doors the following year, in 1981, Jones became the resident pianist. Now, having a residency in a reliable room, it means you were consistently discoverable.
You're always there.
Right. Because he was in that specific room, playing on that exact stage night after night. A man named Jim West walked in and heard him play.
Oh, wow.
And West was so blown away by what he heard in that room that he literally founded Just in Time Records in 1983.
Wait, he started a label just for him?
with the express purpose of recording Oliver Jones.
That is wild. He didn't just sign him, he built an entire record label around him.
Yeah.
And their very first release was literally called Live at Biddle's Jazz and Ribs.
Full circle.
So a physical room gave him a stage, which birthed a major independent record label. But, buildings are fragile.
They really are.
Biddle's eventually became the House of Jazz, and then the pandemic hit, and it closed permanently in 2020.
Yeah, huge loss.
The original room is just gone. But there's a new room carrying his name today, right? The Center Oliver Jones in Little Burgundy.
And what's fascinating here is how legacy actually functions in the real world.
Right.
It isn't just about preserving a brick-and-mortar shrine to the past. The Center Oliver Jones is an active community center, and it's just finishing up this massive 15-month decarbonization project.
Wait, let's pause there for a second for anyone listening who might not be in, urban planning. What exactly does a decarbonization project mean in this specific context?
Yeah, fair question. It essentially means they're retrofitting the building so it no longer relies on fossil fuels for heating and cooling.
Oh, okay.
They're transitioning it to clean energy. So functionally, it makes the building sustainable and just much cheaper to run in the long term.
So they can afford to keep it open.
Exactly. By upgrading the physical infrastructure, they're literally keeping the doors open for decades to come, ensuring they can continue to offer youth programs and family support.
That makes so much sense.
They are preserving the function of Oliver Jones's legacy, which was nurturing the community, rather than just, slapping a plaque on an old jazz club and calling it a day.
So the first room gave him a career, and the second room uses his name to actually build a future.
Well said.
But, if Biddle's was a room that welcomed an artist, we also kind of have to talk about the rooms that actively keep artists out.
Oh, yeah. The gatekeepers?
Right. Let's look at Shania Twain. On July 17th, she played a gig at Toronto's Horseshoe Tavern, a venue that holds, just 400 people?
Yeah, roughly 400. It is a massive downshift in scale for someone of her stature.
That is putting it mildly. I mean, playfully playing devil's advocate for a second on behalf of the listener here.
Okay.
Strategically, what is the play here? You don't just accidentally go from playing a 12-show run opening for Harry Styles at Wembley Stadium.
Right in front of 90,000 screaming fans.
Exactly. 90,000 people to playing a tiny Toronto dive bar. Why shrink your audience by that magnitude right before dropping a brand new album?
Because it is a profoundly physical argument about her origins. To really understand the strategy, you have to look at the power dynamics of her early career.
Okay.
Shania Twain grew up singing in rough Ontario bars, right?
Yeah.
But during those formative years, the Horseshoe Tavern, which has been this legendary incubator since, 1947, it was completely inaccessible to her.
Really?
Yeah. As she explicitly told the press, she was never big enough or known enough to be allowed on that stage back then.
Wow.
So by returning to it now, literally a week before releasing her new album, she is conquering a room that originally rejected her.
She is basically kicking down a door that was locked to her teenage self.
Exactly.
Which perfectly sets the thematic stage for the new album itself, Little Miss Twain, which dropped on July 24th.
Yeah.
It was produced by Zach Dawes, and it is this fascinating rejection of her past sound. She completely abandons the massive, polished, stadium country scale of albums like Come On Over.
Right, the stuff that made her a global superstar.
Yeah. Instead, these 15 tracks are incredibly raw. She's actively revisiting her awkward, unfinished teenage self.
And to achieve that mathematically, Zach Dawes pushes the production into spaces she just hasn't traditionally occupied.
Like what?
We're talking swampy blues, heavy rock, and deep gospel. It's an artist deliberately stripping away the gloss to argue with her own past, basically using her current power to redefine who she was back then.
And the collaborations on this record really highlight how raw that sound gets.
Oh, for sure.
You've got Josh Homme from Queens of the Stone Age showing up on a track called Faded Blue Jeans.
Which is unexpected.
Right, pulling it into this heavy rock space. Then Take It to the River brings in the War and Treaty, adding this massive grounding gospel weight.
Yeah.
But conceptually, the most striking track has to be the title track featuring Tanya Tucker.
This is such a great detail.
It really is.
Yeah.
Shania's mother used to drive her to those childhood gigs, right? Constantly telling her to imagine being the next Tanya Tucker.
Just manifesting it.
Yeah. So to have Tucker literally step out of that childhood memory to sing on this album, it's like she's finally validating that little girl in the Ontario bars.
It is a beautiful realization of a dream.
Yeah.
But, it forces us to confront a much harsher reality about the music ecosystem today.
Which is...
Well, if the Horseshoe Tavern represents this critical proving ground. The room you dream of finally reaching. What happens when those rooms start getting demolished?
Ah.
We lost Biddles. And another legendary Toronto space was just on the brink of being wiped out entirely.
Yes, Sneaky D's at 431 College Street.
Yeah?
It's an absolute staple of the Toronto music and art scene, and there is a major legislative push right now to protect it.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. A motion was introduced at Toronto City Council by Councillor Diane Sachs, and it was seconded by Josh Matlow, to basically evaluate Sneaky D's for a potential heritage designation under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act.
And it is so vital to understand the mechanics of what this means for you as a listener. A heritage evaluation under Part 4 isn't just like a ceremonial honor. It's not a plaque.
Right. It's not just a nice gesture.
Exactly. It gives the municipality the legal teeth to designate an individual property as having cultural value, which then creates massive regulatory hurdles for anyone trying to tear it down.
So it's essentially like putting together an endangered species list, but for urban culture. You can't just save the animal. You have to legally protect its habitat from the developers.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to put it. And we know this mechanism actually works because just a few weeks prior, on July 3rd, a redevelopment application that would have demolished Sneaky D's was completely withdrawn.
Wow.
Yeah, after a massive public pressure campaign. When the city initiates this kind of study, they are basically pausing the bulldozers to ask a fundamental question.
Right.
Does a working-class dive bar hold enough historical weight to deserve the exact same legal protection as, say, a Victorian mansion?
Yeah.
Because without these gritty incubators, the next Oliver Jones or the next Shania Twain literally has nowhere to practice.
And when physical venues like Sneaky D's have to fight tooth and nail just to keep the lights on, it naturally forces emerging artists to migrate online.
Of course, it's the path of least resistance.
But the architecture of the internet brings a whole new, massive problem.
Oh, wait.
Like, who exactly pays for the electricity in a virtual venue? Right now, the government is scrambling to figure out how to regulate the financial architecture of digital streaming platforms.
This is perhaps the most consequential structural shift in the entire industry right now.
Let's break down the timeline for this. On July 17th, a letter was filed with the Federal Court of Appeal stating Ottawa's intention to scrap a major policy.
Right.
Because back in 2024, the CRTC, that's the Canadian Radio, Television, and Telecommunications Commission, they regulate broadcasting, they introduced a 5% base contribution requirement for large online streaming services.
Yeah, basically an internet tax.
Right. They told giant tech companies, if you operate here, you have to pay a 5% tax to fund domestic Canadian content. But that tax was stayed in court and was never actually collected.
Right, because the massive streaming platforms immediately fought it. They argued about jurisdictional overreach and, the fairness of the revenue formulas.
Naturally.
So the legal system effectively hit pause on the CRTC's ability to enforce it.
Okay, so now, Ottawa intends to scrap that corporate requirement entirely. And in its place, they plan to replace that expected revenue with direct government funding.
Yes.
This ties back to a $600 million per year initiative they announced back in early June. But I have to push back here.
Go for it.
Isn't there a massive functional difference between taxing a platform and relying on a government grant?
Functionally, it is a completely different ecosystem. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, looking at this purely impartially, it centers on an architectural debate about virtual rooms.
Okay.
Under a corporate tax model, the financial burden is placed on the private international platforms that profit off of user data and subscriptions.
Right.
But under a centralized grant model, domestic creation is subsidized by the state through general government revenues.
Which changes who is holding the purse strings.
Exactly. Critics of the tax say it unfairly burdens tech companies who might just pass the costs on to consumers.
Right, raising subscription fees.
Exactly. While critics of the grant model worry, it makes artists entirely dependent on political budgets and government bureaucracies that can change with every single election.
It totally rewrites the blueprints of how artists are funded.
It does.
And the sheer scale of these virtual rooms is just wild. If we look at the chart desk for a second to see who is actually occupying these digital spaces right now.
Let's hear it.
Gracie Abrams just debuted at #1 on the Billboard Canadian Albums chart with Daughter from Hell.
Huge debut.
Yeah. Over on the Canadian Hot 100, British Columbia's Cameron Whitcomb secured his first ever top 10 single with Kingdom of Fear, coming in at #8.
Awesome for him.
And the artist Talk re-enters the charts after 3 years away, hitting #85 with Time Machine.
See, and that chart activity highlights exactly why this funding debate actually matters.
How so?
Digital rooms have infinite capacity. They allow for massive international pop stars to debut right alongside regional independent artists.
Side by side.
Right. But the algorithm favors whatever keeps users engaged, which is exactly why the underlying funding policies are so fiercely contested right now.
But if government policy governs how music is distributed and funded in those digital rooms, the next logical step brings us to an even weirder legal room.
Oh, this is the wild stuff.
Who actually creates the music that goes inside them? Because what happens when the creator is a machine?
This is where the legal definition of an author is literally being torn apart in real time.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We have to talk about a landmark federal court case, CIPP v. Sony.
Yeah.
It revolves around a piece of visual art, an image called Surrealist. A creator named Ankit Soni used a reference photograph of Vincent van Gogh's The Starry Night, and he fed it into an AI application called RGAF.
Okay.
To generate the image, he used something called a, quote, numerical style transfer value, end quote. Can you translate that into plain English for us?
Sure. Think of a numerical style transfer value, like a highly advanced volume dial on a soundboard, but for visual aesthetics.
Okay, a volume dial.
Right. So Sony provides the base image and then turns the dial to tell the software exactly how much of Van Gogh's specific brushstroke style to mathematically apply to his original photo.
Okay, so he turns the dial, the AI bakes the cake, and he gets this new image.
Essentially, yes.
But here's where I am completely confused. In December 2021, the Canadian Intellectual Property Office, or CIPO, actually registered both Sony and the AI software as co-authors.
Yep.
Wait, if Canadian copyright law strictly requires human authorship, how on earth did a government office legally register a piece of code as a co-author? Isn't that a direct contradiction of their own rules?
It is a massive contradiction, which is exactly why it is in federal court right now. Legal experts believe it was either an unprecedented test case that kind of just slipped through the cracks,
Right.
or it was an agency grappling with brand new technology without any legal precedent to guide them.
Makes sense.
So now, CIPPEP, which is the Canadian Internet Policy and Public Interest Clinic, they are fighting to strike it down. They argue that Sony's inputs, just providing a photo and turning that style dial, do not constitute enough human expression to legally make him an author.
And what does he say?
Sony argues his inputs and the AI's generation were distinct, valid contributions.
And this is exactly why the music industry is watching this case like a hawk.
Oh, absolutely.
Music Publishers Canada actually stepped in as an intervener here, and they have a very specific, nuanced take. They argue that software cannot be a legal author, period. Full stop.
Right.
However, they are arguing that human copyright should be assessed on a case-by-case basis, depending on the creator's, quote, skill and judgment.
And that nuance is everything. Because if you think about a modern music producer, they are already using algorithms to isolate vocals, generate drum loops, or master tracks.
Basically every day.
Exactly. So if the court rules that any AI involvement completely strips you of your copyright, the entire modern music industry collapses legally.
I want to turn this over to you, the listener, for a second. Think about your favorite song right now. The emotion behind it. If a producer uses AI to generate a raw melody, but then they arrange it, they write lyrics over it, and they perform it, where is the line?
It's blurry.
Right. How much human direction is required before that AI-assisted song is legally considered an original human work? Where is the exact boundary between using a synthesizer as a tool and surrendering your authorship to a machine?
It is genuinely the defining legal question for the next decade of art.
Yeah.
Because copyright isn't just a piece of paper. It's the legal architecture that protects a creator's livelihood. Without that legal room, artists simply cannot monetize their work.
Now, from that incredibly cold, data-driven question of AI authorship, I want to pivot to the exact opposite.
Okay.
What happens when music is built on the deepest, most painful, and most human data possible, which is family history?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Let's talk about aquaculture and the 2026 Polaris Music Prize.
This is such an important story. And for listeners who might not be familiar with the Canadian awards ecosystem, the Polaris Music Prize is essentially the gold standard for artistic merit.
Yeah.
It ignores commercial sales and radio play entirely, focusing purely on the critical and artistic weight of an album.
And Aquaculture's album, 1783, which just made the shortlist, has immense historical weight. The title itself is a structural marker.
Yes.
1783 is the year Black Loyalists, which includes the ancestors of the artist behind Aquaculture, Lance Sampson, arrived in Nova Scotia.
The creation of this record is a masterclass in gathering human data. Samson didn't set out just to write catchy songs, you know. He began this project to answer deep questions.
Yeah.
His own children were asking him about their heritage.
Wow.
And to find those answers, he couldn't just Google it.
Right. The data isn't just sitting on Wikipedia.
Exactly. He literally traveled through historic communities like East Preston and North Preston, sitting down and speaking directly with elders and local historians.
Just absorbing that history.
Yes. He took that oral history, that lived experience, and working alongside producer Aaron Costello, built an entire album about inheritance, trauma, and survival.
It is so incredibly powerful, and there is a track on the album called Gallows that is just devastating.
Yeah, it really is.
It is written entirely from the first-person perspective of Sampson's great-great-grandfather, a military veteran named Daniel Perry Sampson. In 1935, Daniel was executed in Halifax under heavily disputed circumstances.
A very dark chapter.
The family always maintained that something was terribly wrong with the justice system's narrative, and later historical research actually uncovered conflicting evidence and a highly disputed confession.
Right.
So writing from his ancestors' perspective in those final moments, it is an act of historical reclamation.
And this raises an important question about how we interact with the music we consume.
How do you mean?
Well, the historical context of the Black Loyalists and Daniel Perry Sampson isn't just supplementary material tucked away in the liner notes, right?
Right.
It is the structural integrity of the album itself. It determines the voices used, the emotional gravity of the instrumentation, and the entire reason the project exists.
Yeah.
In this case, the album becomes the ultimate room.
Right.
It's a sonic space where past and present generations meet to ensure that their memory and survival aren't just erased by time.
That perfectly encapsulates the entire journey we've taken on this deep dive today, really. When you step back and look at the vulnerability of this whole ecosystem,
It's all connected.
from Oliver Jones's legacy requiring a community center to undergo decarbonization just to stay open, to Shania Twain returning to conquer a tavern that once locked her out,
Yep.
from Sneaky D's needing heritage laws to fight off bulldozers, to the courts deciding if a human actually owns the music they made with an AI. And finally, to Aquaculture, using music to build an indestructible home for his family's history.
It's a lot to process.
It is. Music doesn't just survive on its own. It relies on artists and communities fighting to build and protect these physical, legal, and historical structures so the art can actually travel between generations.
Because without a space to safely incubate and exist, the sound simply fades into the background noise.
Which leaves me with a final thought for you to mull over today. As we watch physical venues struggle against real estate developers, and as our listening habits migrate into massive, algorithmically controlled digital spaces, what happens when the literal rooms we rely on disappear entirely?
A scary thought.
Do the cultural memories and the legacies tied to those legendary spaces just vanish with the brick and mortar? Or does the music we carry with us secretly preserve the architecture of those lost spaces forever, echoing the shape of the room long after the building has been torn down?
A vital question for anyone who cares about where their music comes from.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep listening, keep exploring, and we will see you next time.